Welcome, aspiring educators, to This Explainer. Today we're looking at something absolutely incredible. We're going to explore language pedagogy, which, if you really think about it, is essentially the architectural blueprint for building a student's mind. When you teach a child a language, you aren't just giving them words, you're literally handing them the tools they need to construct their thoughts, connect with people, and basically understand the entire world around them. Today, we're going to master this blueprint, and we've tailored it specifically to help you absolutely ace your TST2 exam. I am so thrilled to walk you through this. So, let's get our foundational plans in order, shall we?
Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Understanding pedagogy. 2. The 4 core skills. 3. Fundamental principles. 4. Role of the teacher. 5. NCF and NEP frameworks. And finally, 6. Your TET2 exam checklist. Oh, and a quick meta-narrative wink for you. By showing you this up front, I'm actually using the known to unknown principle that we're going to cover shortly.
All right, Section 1. Understanding language pedagogy. Let's dive right in and define the core foundation of our linguistic blueprint.
So what exactly is language pedagogy? Well, it's definitely not just teaching. It's a scientific, highly intentional, and well-planned process. You're adopting very specific principles, methods, and techniques to make learning effective, interesting, and above all else, student-centered. You aren't just walking into a room and talking at kids. You're engineering an environment where language acquisition happens naturally and systematically. The student is the absolute center of this whole scientific process.
To pull off this scientific process, we focus on 6 main objectives. First up, developing listening comprehension, teaching them to truly hear and understand. Second, cultivating clear and confident speaking. Third, building reading speed and understanding. Fourth, enhancing their written expression along with proper grammar. Fifth, fostering creative expression so they can go off and write their own poems or stories. And finally, nurturing a genuine love for the language and its culture. Collectively, these objectives don't just teach a subject, they literally construct a confident, fully rounded communicator.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 core skills. Now that we know what we're building, let's look at the actual tools we need. Listen, if you memorize absolutely nothing else today, memorize this sequence for your TET2 exam. The acronym is LSRW. That's listening, speaking, reading, writing. There is a beautiful, almost biological logic to how this sequence naturally flows. Think about it. A child has to first receive language by listening to it before they can possibly produce it by speaking. That's your oral communication. Then they move to written communication. Again, they first receive the input through reading, and only then do they produce their own output through writing. It always goes input, then output. Remember that, LSRW.
Okay, Section 3. Fundamental principles of teaching. Let's see how this builds from basic skills into the core rules of actually teaching them.
These right here are the guiding rules for a master educator. Just imagine you're in the classroom. First rule, you always move from simple to complex. You wouldn't start with advanced grammar, right? You start with basic vocabulary. Second, known to unknown. You connect totally new concepts to what the student already understands. Third, concrete to abstract. You physically show them an apple before you ever discuss the abstract concept of nutrition. Fourth, making it activity-based ensures the student is an active participant, not just sitting there as a passive listener. And fifth, child-centered learning. Every single lesson plan revolves around the child's needs and pace. When you weave all these together, learning becomes completely frictionless.
Next up, Section 4, Role of the teacher. Let's shift the focus to the person actually managing this educational blueprint, you.
Now, what's really interesting here is the specific terminology you're going to need for the exam. You act as a guide, showing the way, a motivator, keeping their spirits high, an evaluator tracking their progress, and, importantly, a language model, because, let's face it, they're going to mimic exactly how you speak. But I want you to pay really close attention to this one word, facilitator. In modern pedagogy, you aren't a dictator of facts. You're a facilitator, basically making the learning process smoother and more accessible. This specific term pops up in exams all the time because it perfectly captures that big shift towards student-centered learning.
All right, Section 5, NCF and NEP frameworks. We need to look at the official building codes that govern our pedagogical architecture.
Here we're impartially contrasting the 2 major educational frameworks in India, and trust me, this is highly testable material. The National Curriculum Framework of 2005 views language fundamentally as a social process. It heavily emphasizes activity-based learning and firmly establishes that making mistakes is a totally natural, necessary part of learning. You give students opportunities for expression, errors and all. Now, if we contrast that with the more recent National Education Policy of 2020, we see a strong, modern emphasis on mother tongue instruction and multilingualism. The NEP focuses heavily on cognitive development, developing thinking and logic through language using dialogue and creativity. Both of these frameworks are absolutely vital, and understanding their distinct focuses is going to be key to your success.
Finally, Section 6, TET 2 Exam Checklist. Let's bring the focus directly to your practical goal with this highly actionable section.
So the crucial point is optimizing your study time. And this ultimate TET 2 checklist summarizes everything you absolutely must memorize. Your high priority topics are the 4 skills. Remember LSRW and the core objectives of language learning. You absolutely must know the teacher's role as a facilitator, and you have to be able to contrast the NCF 2005 and NEP 2020 frameworks just like we did. Your medium priority topics, which are still super important by the way, include the difference between language acquisition and learning, continuous and comprehensive evaluation, and the correct methods for grammar teaching. Seriously, take a mental snapshot of this checklist right now.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought. Beyond the T2 exam, beyond the multiple choice questions and all the acronyms, lies a real classroom filled with students looking directly at you. How will you apply these foundational principles, moving from the known to the unknown, creating a student-centered environment and acting as a true facilitator to build brilliant minds on your very first day? You've got the blueprint now. You have the tools. Go out there, completely ace that exam, and start building the future. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and best of luck on your amazing journey to becoming a master educator.
Welcome, future teachers of Gujarat. So glad you're joining us for this special explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on the absolute fundamental building blocks of language education to help you prep for your TET 2 exam. We're going to dive right in because honestly, truly understanding how a child acquires language, it's a total game changer for how you'll run your future classroom.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the foundations of language learning, then tackle the listening skill, followed by the speaking skill. After that, we'll look at your specific role as a teacher and wrap the whole thing up with a special rapid-fire review for the TET 2 exam.
All right, Section 1, Foundations of Language Learning. Let's get our groundwork laid.
Think of language learning exactly like constructing a house. You can't just slap a roof on without a solid foundation, right? Well, the 4 foundational skills of language learning follow a really strict, universal sequence known as the LSRW framework. Step 1 is listening, Step 2 is speaking, Step 3 is reading, and Step 4 is writing. Think about a baby. They absorb sounds for months and months before they ever try to babble. So listening and speaking are literally the bedrock. You just can't skip them. Reading and writing rely entirely on that base.
Moving on to Section 2, Listening Skill, its meaning and its importance. Let's really explore this ground floor of our language building.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the definition itself. Listening is absolutely not just hearing noise. Hearing, that's passive. It just happens to your ears. But listening, that is the active process of paying deep attention to what someone else is saying and actually processing its true meaning. So as a teacher, getting your students to actively listen rather than just passively hear you is going to be your very first hurdle.
So why is this active listening so incredibly crucial? Well, it's the very first process of language acquisition. It's the gateway. Just by listening, a student naturally boosts their vocabulary. It is exactly how they pick up proper pronunciation. They literally absorb the rhythm and tone of your voice. It develops their raw comprehension, ramps up their focus, builds their communication skills, and honestly, it's the main way they acquire new knowledge in those early years.
Okay, so knowing it's important is one thing, but what does it look like in action? You want to totally immerse them in language. Have them listen to great stories and rhythmic poems. Mix in some daily news listening. Use audio clips so they hear different accents. Run interactive quizzes and just let them listen to peer discussions. These aren't just fun time fillers, they are highly targeted exercises designed to strengthen those active listening muscles.
All right, Section 3, Speaking Skill. Once that ground floor is rock solid, we step up to the first floor, which naturally follows listening. Let's clearly define speaking in the classroom. It's the process of verbally expressing internal thoughts, feelings, and experiences. If listening is how we take the world in, well, speaking is how we put ourselves out there. It's the active, creative counterpart to listening.
The real magic here is how speaking literally transforms a student. It is a massive confidence builder. When a kid learns to speak effectively, they can clearly express their thoughts. It strengthens how they communicate, helps them build real social relationships with their friends, sparks early leadership qualities, and ultimately seals their mastery over the language. Remember this, a completely silent classroom isn't always a learning classroom.
To get them talking, you need structure. You can't just say, "Hey, speak." You have to give them a real reason to. Have them retell stories in their own words, or describe exactly what's going on in a picture. You can organize small group discussions, run elocution competitions, and definitely use role play. Even having them present simple dialogues or do verbal quizzes gets them actively using the language. You're drawing the language right out of them. Just look at this beautiful synergy here. A good listener on one side, a good speaker on the other. You guys, these are not isolated skills. They are deeply connected. You literally can't have one without the other. A good listener naturally has the tools to become a great speaker because they've already banked the vocabulary, the pronunciation, and the sentence structure. They are completely equipped to express themselves. Let's jump to Section 4, your role as a teacher. Where do you fit into this whole puzzle?
For listening, you are the ultimate model. Your students are going to mirror you perfectly. That means your pronunciation has to be crystal clear and accurate. You've got to bring in stories and poems that actually capture their attention. And you need to actively encourage careful listening. Don't just assume they are tuned in. Also, definitely bring in modern audiovisual tools to give them a rich experience beyond just hearing your voice every day.
Now for speaking, your role pivots. You become a facilitator. You have to intentionally create opportunities for every single student to talk. And here's the crucial psychological piece. You have to maintain a super positive attitude toward their mistakes. If a kid thinks they'll be mocked for slipping up, they will just shut down completely. You have to build a safe, encouraging space where making mistakes is just a totally normal part of getting fluent.
Let's back all this up with some authority. The official National Curriculum Framework, NCF 2005, lays it out perfectly. It says language is not just a dry subject for memorizing grammar rules. Not at all. It's a dynamic tool for developing major life skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Grammar is secondary. Communication and skill development, that is the primary goal. You'll definitely want to keep that philosophy front and center.
All right, Section 5, special for the TET2 exam. Let's shift gears. This is a high-energy, flashcard-style review to lock in those points.
Okay, here is a classic, direct TET2 style question for you. Based on what we just went over, what does a child learn first when acquiring a language? The answer, without a doubt, is listening. Lock that in. It is always the absolute first step before any other language skill even starts to form.
Let's quickly run through these guaranteed point scores. The first skill, listening. The second, speaking. The unchangeable sequence, LSRW. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. Remember that listening and speaking together are known as oral skills. And if they ask what foundational skill makes a good speaker, you know the answer. It's listening. So, if we distill everything today into one golden rule for your exam, it's this. Listening and speaking are the foundational oral skills of language education. They are completely irreplaceable when it comes to developing a child's language abilities, their communication skills, their self-confidence, and their true power of expression. Just memorize the essence of that. It's the core of everything we do in language methodology.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. You've got the science, the exact sequence, and the classroom strategies down. So I'll leave you with this. Are you ready to take this knowledge, walk confidently into that classroom, and build an unbreakable language foundation for your future students? I am absolutely sure that you are. Stay focused, best of luck on that TET2 exam, and keep learning.
Welcome back to today's explainer. If you're gearing up for the TET2 exam, you already know how crucial language methodology is. So today, we're locking down a couple of absolute must-know concepts: language acquisition, or adigam, and language learning, or abhyas. Honestly, if you're stepping into a language classroom, getting a firm grip on the difference between these two is completely non-negotiable. So let's jump right in. Actually, let's start with a quick thought experiment. Think back to when you were a little kid. How did you effortlessly learn to speak your mother tongue without ever opening a single grammar book? I mean, you definitely weren't studying verb conjugations or sentence structures as a toddler, right? You just picked it up. Now, compare that to how you learned a second language later on, like English or Sanskrit, sitting at a desk in a rigid classroom. That stark contrast between naturally picking up a language and formally studying one, that is exactly what we're breaking down today. So here is our quick roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the basics of acquisition and learning, look at how one is a natural process while the other is highly formal, highlight their main differences, dive into Stephen Krashen's famous hypothesis, and wrap up with exactly how this is going to show up on your TET 2 exam. All right, sections 1 and 2. Acquisition, a natural process. So what exactly is acquisition? Formally, language acquisition, or adigam, is the natural, totally subconscious process of learning a language through daily communication and lived experience, without any formal grammar instruction. It's that amazing phenomenon where a child just organically absorbs the language going on around them. They listen to their parents, they play with their siblings, they try to communicate, and boom, they're speaking. They don't even know they're learning. They just want a snack or a toy, and the language is just the tool they naturally develop to get it. The big takeaway here is that acquisition is entirely natural. It happens subconsciously. The brain is literally wiring itself for language without any deliberate effort from the kid. It's driven 100% by the desire to have a conversation and get needs met. And grammar rules? Barely even a factor. If a toddler messes up a sentence, we don't hand them a textbook, right? They just naturally self-correct over time by hearing the language spoken correctly around them. Ultimately, this is the primary, universal way we all master our mother tongue. Let's flip the script. Section 3. Learning, a formal process. Unlike the smooth, subconscious flow of acquisition, language learning, or abhyas, is a highly conscious formal process. This is all about acquiring language rules, grammar, and structures, usually through a school, guided by a teacher, and relying heavily on textbooks. It's incredibly deliberate. Think about sitting in a classroom, staring at a whiteboard, and actively trying to memorize endless English verb tenses or Hindi syntax. You are hyper-aware every single second that you are being taught a language. Because it's so deliberate, learning requires active awareness. It happens at a formal educational setting, and there's a massive emphasis on grammatical accuracy. It's also super teacher-centric. The instructor is the one dictating the pace, the curriculum, and the rules. Now, while acquisition is the magic behind our mother tongue, formal learning is incredibly useful, and honestly, usually necessary when you're trying to master a second or third language later in life. Moving on to Section 4. Acquisition versus learning. The main differences. Okay, understanding these concepts on their own is great, but putting them side by side is where it really clicks. Think of this table as your ultimate cheat sheet. Acquisition lives in the informal, subconscious environment of the home, right? Learning demands the direct, conscious, rule-heavy environment of a school. One relies on daily conversation to master a mother tongue without even thinking about grammar, while the other leans on a teacher and a book to directly teach grammar for a second language. Next up, Section 5, Stephen Krashen's hypothesis. To really give this some academic weight, we have to talk about linguist Stephen Krashen. He outlined 4 fundamental points in his famous acquisition learning hypothesis. First, he flat out stated that acquisition and learning are 2 totally separate, distinct things. Second, and this is huge, he argued that a true instinctive grip on a language only develops through natural acquisition. Third, he said the formal rules we learn in school, they really just act as an internal editor or a monitor to help us polish and correct our language. And finally, because true fluency comes from acquiring, he believed natural communication should be heavily emphasized in language education. So why does this matter for us as educators? Why do we need both in a classroom? Well, acquisition is vital because it sparks natural growth. It completely boosts a student's confidence to actually speak up and develops their real-world communication skills. But learning is equally important because it brings grammatical accuracy to the table. It polishes the language, it drastically improves reading and writing, and let's be practical here, it's absolutely crucial for helping students score well on their exams. Which brings us to Section 6, Preparation for the TET 2 exam. Okay, let's talk strategy. If you get hit with a 5-mark subjective question asking you to explain the difference between acquisition and learning, your answer needs to systematically hit these exact bullet points. First, define both. Make sure you explicitly contrast the natural versus formal aspects. Next, clearly mention the subconscious versus conscious awareness. Then, differentiate between how they apply to the mother tongue versus a second language. And finally, wrap it up by stating that both processes are equally important in effective language teaching. You hit those points, you're looking at full marks. Let's test this out real quick with some multiple choice questions you might actually see on the paper. Read the question carefully. Which process occurs when a child learns their mother tongue naturally? Okay, the absolute keyword here is naturally. So the natural learning of a mother tongue is without a doubt C, acquisition. Next up, testing our theorists. Who proposed the acquisition learning hypothesis? Is it A, Piaget, B, Skinner, C, Krashen, or D, Vygotsky? As we just discussed, the linguist behind this massive concept is C, Stephen Krashen. Don't let huge names like Piaget or Vygotsky throw you off here. Krashen is our language acquisition guy. And one more MCQ. What is the conscious education of a language's grammar rules called? Is it A, acquisition, B, learning, C, imitation, or D, communication? The trigger words you're looking for here are conscious education and grammar rules. That points us straight to the formal classroom setting, meaning the answer is definitively B, learning. If you remember literally nothing else for test day, lock this into your brain right now. Acquisition equals natural, which links perfectly to your mother tongue or Edigam. Learning equals formal, which links perfectly to school language or Abhyas. If you can remember these clean, simple pairs, I promise you won't get tripped up under the pressure of the exam. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought about your own future classroom. Ask yourself, what kind of environment are you going to run? Are you going to enforce a strict, formal learning zone where every single grammar mistake gets penalized? Or will you foster a safe, open space for natural language acquisition? The very best language teachers, they know exactly how to blend both. Thanks for joining me today, and best of luck with your prep.
Welcome, aspiring educators. If you're gearing up for the TET 2 exam, well, you've landed in exactly the right place. In today's explainer, we're going to unpack the absolute bedrock of your future career, the foundations of language teaching methodology. Now, my goal today isn't just to help you, memorize a textbook. I want to be your guide in making this complex pedagogy completely unforgettable. By the time we wrap up, you won't just know the answers for the test, you'll understand exactly how to use them in a real, live classroom.
Okay, let's dive into our agenda. We're going to kick things off with the foundation of language teaching. From there, we'll move into the main principles of teaching. Third, we'll break down the rules of the NCF and NEP. And finally, we'll actually put all this to the test with some TET 2 exam preparation.
All right, Section 1, Foundation of Language Teaching. The core purpose.
So, the source material makes one thing crystal clear. Language teaching has to be three things. It needs to be effective, interesting, and student-centric. Honestly, every single principle we're about to cover is anchored right here. Because you're not just delivering information, you're creating an environment that's deeply engaging. If the student isn't the total center of the experience, the language, it just won't stick.
Moving right along to Section 2, Main Principles of Teaching, the 12 Core Methodologies.
The very first major concept is the simple to complex principle. And this brilliantly illustrates how scaffolding actually works. I mean, you wouldn't just hand a kid an essay on day one, right? No way. You start with something super simple, like a single letter. Then you progress to a word. From words, you build sentences, and from sentences, you naturally arrive at a paragraph. It's step by step. You gradually introduce the tough stuff without totally overwhelming the learner.
Next up, we have two principles that work beautifully side by side, known to unknown and concrete to abstract. With known to unknown, you bridge prior knowledge. So think about using a student's mother tongue to teach them a brand new word in a different language. Then there's concrete to abstract. If you're teaching the name of a fruit, you don't just describe it, you physically show them the fruit. Bridging what they already know with tangible objects massively reduces their cognitive load. It makes the abstract idea of a new language feel safe, familiar, and way less scary.
Following that, we get into grammar, action, and interest. The simple to difficult grammar principle is exactly what it sounds like. Grammar should follow natural usage first. But perhaps the most vital principle for active participation is learning by doing. This means actually giving students the chance to speak, read, and write through discussions, dialogues, and role play. Mix that with the interest and motivation principle, bringing in songs, stories, and games, and suddenly learning isn't some boring chore. It's an activity they actually look forward to.
Now let's group these essential classroom management principles together. First, repetition. This is what makes newly acquired knowledge permanent. But as you repeat, you've got to remember individual differences. Every single student learns at their own unique pace, and a great teacher adapts to that. You'll also want to use correlation, which is basically integrating language into other subjects like science or math. And through all of this, you absolutely must maintain a child-centric approach. You're the guide. And hey, don't be afraid to utilize their mother tongue in those early stages to really build up their confidence.
All of this builds into our final principle, the integration of language skills.
These 4 skills are deeply, deeply interconnected, and they have to be developed in a specific order. A student must first listen, then speak, then read, and finally write. You really can't skip a step here and expect true fluency. They all just feed right into one another to create a fully well-rounded language user.
All right, Section 3, Rules of NCF and NEP. Let's take a look at these modern educational frameworks. So the absolutely crucial point is captured perfectly in this single, powerful quote from the National Curriculum Framework of 2005. It says, "Don't just teach language, provide opportunities to use it." Think about that for a second. This isn't about lecturing at all. It's about experiential learning. You're handing the students the keys to the car rather than just showing them a picture of one.
Let's look a bit deeper at how NCF 2005 totally shifted the paradigm. It moved us completely away from rote memorization. Under this new framework, mistakes aren't failures. Actually, scratch that. They are seen as a totally necessary part of the learning process. The classroom shifts to prioritize dialogue and interaction. It promotes multilingualism, and above all, it places this huge value on the actual lived experiences of the students themselves.
Building on that, we have the National Education Policy, or NEP 2020. Now, notice how it takes those goals of the NCF and modernizes them even further. There is a massive, renewed focus on the mother tongue or local language as the primary vehicle for early education. It doubles down on multilingualism and activity-based learning, but it explicitly targets communication skills through creative and experiential learning. It's all about practical, real-world readiness.
Okay, Section 4, TET 2 exam preparation. Let's test your knowledge.
All right, it is time to apply what we've been talking about to some actual TET 2 exam questions. Listen to this first multiple-choice question. Letter to word to sentence to paragraph is an example of which principle? Is it known to unknown, concrete to abstract, simple to complex, or repetition? Think back to that scaffolding idea we discussed earlier. You start small and you gradually build up. Got your guess?
And the answer is C, simple to complex. You start with simple letters and naturally build up to those complex paragraphs.
Let's move on to question 2. Which principle keeps the student active in language learning? The options are learning by doing, repetition, correlation, or evaluation. Remember when we talked about role-playing, dialogue, and stepping away from just lecturing? What was the name of that specific principle?
Exactly. The answer is A, learning by doing. Active engagement is literally the ultimate key to retention. When students are doing, they are learning. Question 3. What approach does NCF 2005 emphasize in language teaching? Rote learning, lecture, dialogue and interaction, or only grammar? Think about that major paradigm shift we talked about, the move away from old-school methods toward a modern, experiential classroom. The answer is C, dialogue and interaction. Fantastic job if you nailed that one. NCF 2005 is all about giving students the opportunity to actually use the language with one another.
Now, besides multiple choice, you also need to prepare for descriptive answers. For a 5-mark question asking you to explain language teaching principles, you need a cohesive summary. You don't want to just list them, you need to synthesize them. Explain how simple to complex and known to unknown reduce cognitive load. Detail how concrete to abstract pairs beautifully with learning by doing and interest to keep the student engaged. Then wrap up your paragraph by emphasizing that the whole shebang is built on a child-centric approach reinforced by repetition. That is exactly how you secure all 5 marks.
Finally, I want to leave you with this ultimate memory trick. If you freeze on the exam, just visualize this sequence. Simple to known to concrete to active to interesting to repetition. This simple chain unlocks the vast majority of the pedagogy we've covered today. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. Armed with these brilliant student-centric methodologies, how are you going to use this sequence to completely transform your future classroom? Keep that in mind, go absolutely ace that TE2 exam, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey there, future educators. Welcome. Let's just dive right into this explainer on the foundational language skills that are going to not only help you completely ace your TET 2 exam, but also make you an incredibly effective teacher in the real world. Whether you're totally new to language pedagogy or you're just looking to sharpen up before exam day, you are exactly where you need to be. Today, we're unpacking how a child's brain actually acquires language, and more importantly, how you can foster that exact growth in your future classroom.
So we've got a super focused roadmap today. We'll start with basic language skills, then dive into listening as the critical first step, followed by speaking as the medium of expression. After that, we'll cover your specific role and activities as a teacher and wrap it all up with a TET 2 exam review to lock in those marks.
All right, Section 1, Basic Language Skills, the 4 pillars of language pedagogy. To truly understand how a kid absorbs language, we first have to look at the foundational building blocks.
Now, this illustrates the unbreakable, natural sequence of human language. Think about it. A baby doesn't just pop out and start reading textbooks, right? Their language acquisition actually starts in the womb through pure listening, or shravan. And that listening naturally blooms into speaking, which is kathan. Only after those oral foundations are totally set do we introduce reading, vachin, and finally writing, lekin. For your exams, just burn this acronym into your brain. LSRW. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. It's literally the absolute law of language development.
Moving on to Section 2, listening, or shravan, the first step and the foundation of all language. Let's put this first core concept under the microscope and see why it's the spark that ignites everything else.
What's really interesting here is a crucial distinction in the textbook definition you'll need for your notes. Listening requires actively understanding meaning. It is not just the biological function of hearing a noise. If a student hears your words but doesn't process the meaning behind them, they aren't actually practicing the skill of listening. It requires active cognitive engagement.
So why is this absolutely critical? Well, because every single word a child will ever say or write begins with the rhythm they absorb through listening. Starting right at home with their family, it's the primary engine for exponentially increasing their vocabulary. By soaking up what they hear, a child internalizes proper pronunciation and tone. They basically become better communicators simply because they understand the subtle nuances of the messages going into their ears.
Which brings us to Section 3, speaking, or katham, the medium of expression. Once the input is firmly established through listening, we naturally shift to the output phase.
Speaking is essentially the glorious, kind of messy process of taking internalized language and sharing it with the world. It's the direct translation of those abstract internal thoughts, those fleeting feelings, and complex lived experiences, transforming them into structured, understandable oral language.
The big takeaway here is that speaking fundamentally shapes a child's personality. Most notably, it massively boosts their self-confidence. I mean, think about the courage it takes to stand up in front of your peers and articulate a thought. That's completely transformative for a young student. It allows them to use language practically every day, which builds strong, lifelong communication skills. And honestly, it is the absolute primary tool for their social development and for building lasting relationships.
Let's connect these dots for a second. These 2 skills are literally 2 sides of the exact same linguistic coin. Output is entirely dependent on input. A child is only going to speak as well as they have listened. So if you have a student who's struggling with speaking, your very first diagnostic step as a teacher should be to look at the quality and quantity of the listening environment they've been exposed to. The 2 are completely inseparable.
All right, Section 4, the teacher's role and classroom activities. Let's take all this theory about the brain and apply it directly to your future classroom.
It's pretty amazing how passive reception completely fuels active expression. To build up those robust listening skills, you want to heavily immerse your students in storytelling, engaging audio, and games where they have to follow multi-step instructions. Then, once their linguistic tank is totally full, you pivot. You switch to speaking activities like role-playing, vibrant group discussions, and short speeches. Those receptive activities give them the vocabulary and context they need to actually pull off the expressive ones.
But what's your actual job in all of this? Well, it is definitely not just talking at your students. You have to be the architect of a completely fear-free environment, a place where student mistakes are just a normal, expected part of the learning process. When a kid mispronounces a word, it's not a failure. It's just your cue to step in and gently present the perfect model of proper pronunciation. You've got to constantly encourage dialogue so they can practice without the anxiety of harsh judgment.
And hey, this isn't just friendly advice. It's an actual structural requirement. The National Curriculum Framework of 2005 explicitly mandates that dialogue has to be your primary tool. It officially directs educators to place a massive emphasis specifically on listening and speaking, recognizing that they are the absolute bedrock of all future academic success.
On top of that, the modern National Education Policy of 2020 completely backs this up. It demands a conversational approach, and it pushes for early language development heavily through the child's mother tongue. This ensures the cognitive links between their home life and your classroom stay strong and unbroken, which gives them the safest possible space to express themselves.
Okay, Section 5, the TET 2 exam conclusion. Let's secure those marks and reward all your focus today with a quick, rapid-fire review.
If you get hit with a 5-mark subjective question about these roles, here is your golden summary formula. Seriously, write this down. Frame listening as the builder of vocabulary and deep understanding. Then frame speaking as the builder of outward expression and self-confidence. Always conclude by stating that together they form the inescapable foundation required before a kid can ever tackle reading and writing. Structure your answer exactly like that, and you are going to secure full marks.
Let's do a quick knowledge check right now. Think back to the natural timeline of a baby's brain we talked about at the very start. What comes first and what comes absolutely last in the natural sequence of language development?
If you said C, you absolutely nailed it. Remember that acronym, LSRW. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. Just recognizing that progression is virtually a guaranteed mark on any language pedagogy exam you take.
Let's do 2 more rapid-fire questions just to lock this all in before test day. Number 1, what's the absolute first step a human being takes in acquiring language? And number 2, what specific skill builds courage in a crowd and lets a student share their internal world?
The answers are super straightforward, right? Listening, or Shravan, is always step 1. It's the pure input. And speaking, or Katan, is the magic that transforms a quiet, observant student into a confident communicator. Grasping how distinct but deeply connected these two concepts are is exactly how you master this part of the syllabus.
I want to leave you with a really powerful thought directly from your core materials. Listening is the beginning of language learning, and speaking is the first display of language development. So, as you prepare to step into your own classroom, ask yourself, if listening is the seed, are you going to provide the rich soil they need every single day? Or are you just expecting flowers to magically bloom from nothing? Think about that, study hard, and we'll see you in the next explainer.
Welcome, future educators. If you're looking to absolutely ace your upcoming TET 2 exam and step into your future classroom with total confidence, well, mastering the digital toolkit is absolutely non-negotiable. Today, we're diving straight into an explainer on information technology and ICT in language pedagogy. We're going to break down the exact concepts, applications, and strategies you need to crush this test. Let's get into it.
Look at this quote right here. It is not a replacement for education, but a powerful tool to make it more effective. Honestly, this is the single most crucial mindset shift for modern teachers. When you step into that classroom, the smartboard, the tablets, they aren't there to take your job, they're your assistants. Think of yourself as the conductor, and technology is just one of the shiny new instruments in your orchestra.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're covering the exact syllabus points you'll need to memorize. We'll define IT and ICT, see how they enhance language skills, unpack your digital toolkit, review NEP 2020 benefits, give ourselves a quick reality check, and then finish up with some dedicated TET 2 exam prep.
All right, Section 1, defining IT and ICT. Let's lay out those core concepts.
Information and Communication Technology, or ICT for short, is honestly a massive umbrella. The critical thing to remember for the exam is that ICT isn't just a desktop computer sitting in the corner of a lab. It's the entire dynamic process of managing, storing, and exchanging information. Whenever you use a smartboard to broadcast a lesson, or even a mobile phone to share some digital content, you are actively engaging in ICT.
Moving on to Section 2, enhancing language skills. Let's look at everything from listening to writing.
Now, there is a direct, incredibly logical mapping between your digital tools and core pedagogical outcomes. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. For listening, playing audio clips helps your students nail down that proper pronunciation. For speaking, language labs and voice recordings let students self-evaluate, which, massively boosts their confidence. For reading, ebooks make sprawling digital libraries instantly accessible, sparking genuine interest. And finally, for writing, just using a simple word processor helps them catch grammatical errors on the fly, instantly improving those writing mechanics.
Section 3 is all about the digital toolkit. We're talking hardware and software.
Okay, for your exams, and honestly just for your own sanity, it helps so much to group your digital toolkit into 2 distinct buckets. On one side, you've got hardware. These are the physical tools you can actually touch, like computers, projectors, and smartboards.
On the flip side, you have software and digital media. These are the invisible programs and content that run on the hardware. Things like your PowerPoint presentations, digital dictionaries, and educational apps. You really need both working together to make the magic happen. Next up, Section 4, Benefits and NEP 2020. Let's talk policy and real-world impact. So why the big push for tech? Well, IT completely transforms the classroom by making learning deeply visual and engaging, with pictures, video, and animation. It drastically saves you time, and it enables self-paced learning. This is a huge breakthrough, guys. Every student can digest the material at their own speed while building great self-study habits. And remarkably, it also seamlessly supports multilingual education across languages like Gujarati, Hindi, English, and Sanskrit. It's a real game changer. Plus, the integration of tech isn't just some neat idea, it's practically the law of the land now. The National Education Policy 2020, or NEP 2020, strictly mandates this digital push. It demands the widespread use of technology, the development of robust e-learning frameworks, and specifically requires essential ICT training for all aspiring teachers. That's exactly why mastering this topic right here, right now, is so central to your future. Let's transition to Section 5, Reality Check and the Teacher's Role, because we have to manage these limitations. We need to have a quick reality check here, because stepping into a digitized classroom definitely comes with some substantial real-world hurdles. You're inevitably going to deal with power cuts and spotty internet. You'll face unequal access to devices among your students. You'll have to troubleshoot random technical glitches right in the middle of a lesson. And perhaps the toughest part? You'll have to manage students who are so easily distracted by the very screens that are meant to educate them. But hey, these exact limitations are why you, the teacher, are completely irreplaceable. Your vital role isn't just to walk in and turn on a screen. Your job is to carefully curate materials, to teach students how to use these tools creatively rather than just scrolling passively. And above all, you are the one who has to strike that perfect balance between the digital world and traditional offline learning.
All right, Section 6, TET 2 exam prep. It is time to test your knowledge.
First, let's tackle the subjective 5-mark question you might see, explain the importance of IT in language teaching. To get full marks here, make sure you confidently structure your answer around these core concepts. Discuss how IT makes education student-centric, how it strongly encourages independent learning, and be absolutely sure to mention how it actively develops the 4 core skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing through specific tools like audio clips and ebooks. Hit those points, and you're golden. Now, let's do a rapid-fire interactive quiz based on the multiple-choice questions you're likely going to face. Test your memory right now. What is the full form of ICT? Take a look at the options. Is it A, B, C, or D? Okay, if you picked B, you hit the nail on the head. The correct answer is Information and Communication Technology. That's the crucial foundational definition we established right at the beginning of this explainer. Next question. When you use audio clips in your classroom, which specific language skill are you primarily targeting out of the 4 main pillars? Think about it.
The answer is C, listening, or Shravan, as it's known in Gujarati. Like we mapped out earlier, audio materials directly help students grasp proper pronunciation and auditory comprehension. It's a straight line from tool to benefit.
Last question to really lock this in. What is the core emphasis of the National Education Policy 2020 regarding modern classrooms? What are they really pushing for? And the answer is C, digital and technology-based education. This just goes to show that mastering these exact concepts isn't just about passing a test. It is literally central to the future of your entire teaching career under the current national policies. So as you head into your exam and eventually step into your very own classroom, remember this: the screen doesn't teach, you do. You are the architect of your students' learning. I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If technology is merely the tool, how will you wield this digital toolkit to truly inspire and elevate your students? Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we're diving into something that's absolutely foundational for any aspiring language teacher, especially if you're gearing up for the Gujarat TET 2 exam. We are talking about grammar. Now, I know, the word grammar alone can make people groan, but today we're totally reframing it. Think of grammar not as this rigid set of restrictions, but really as the vital structural skeleton of all language. Without it, well, everything just kind of falls apart. Let's take a look at our roadmap. Here is what we're covering in this explainer. First, the meaning of grammar.
Second, grammar in oral expression. Third, grammar in written expression. Fourth, language education and NCF 2005. And finally, TET 2 exam preparation.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Meaning of Grammar.
So, grammar is officially defined as the science of rules for using language in a pure, disciplined, and meaningful way. Notice those words, right? Pure and disciplined. As future educators, it's absolutely crucial to understand that grammar isn't just a giant list of strict rules you use to punish students. No way! It's actually the ultimate tool for achieving crystal clear clarity. It's the science that ensures the exact thought in your head perfectly matches the thought your listener actually hears.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, Grammar in Oral Expression.
Now, it's wild how a seemingly tiny syntax error can completely derail spoken communication. Think about the standard sentence, I am going to school. Totally clear, right? Now compare it to a subject-verb disagreement like, I goes to school. Instantly, boom, the listener is distracted by the error instead of focusing on your actual message. It's like a speed bump that just breaks the whole flow of the conversation.
But beyond just avoiding mistakes, grammar brings some massive benefits to oral expression. First off, it ensures clear communication without those awkward misunderstandings. It also gives you proper sentence structure, which helps keep your words organized on the fly. And honestly, maybe most importantly for your students, it built incredible confidence. Knowing the rules literally frees you from the fear of sounding foolish out loud. And ultimately, this leads to true language purity, giving a speaker the power to just stand up and speak effortlessly.
All right, now that we see how it impacts our speech, let's move to Section 3, Grammar in Written Expression. And this classic example brilliantly illustrates why punctuation actually saves lives. If you write, let's eat kids without any punctuation, yikes, right? Terrifying. Total disaster. But simply by adding a comma, you get, let's eat kids. Suddenly, it's just a friendly dinner invitation. This goes to show how missing a single punctuation mark entirely changes the meaning. Written grammar has literally zero room for ambiguity.
So, beyond just avoiding accidental cannibalism, grammar provides the absolute foundation for the clear presentation of ideas. It makes your writing easily digestible. It locks in the accuracy of spelling and punctuation so you convey your exact meaning. And, that naturally increases the overall writing quality. Ultimately, grammar is that secret ingredient that adds style and beauty to writing. It's the whole shebang that gives essays, letters, and reports their professional flow.
And as educators, you've got to remember that grammar isn't just some isolated subject sitting in a corner. It is the universal glue that strengthens all 4 essential language skills simultaneously: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Having a strong grasp of grammar drastically reduces spelling errors, syntax issues, and vocabulary mistakes across the board. So by teaching grammar effectively, you are simultaneously upgrading your students' ability to listen, speak, read, and write all at once.
So how do we actually teach this in today's classrooms? Let's shift our focus to modern pedagogy with Section 4, Language Education and NCF 2005.
The National Curriculum Framework of 2005 completely revolutionized things. It explicitly mandates teaching grammar in the context of actual language use. It prioritizes interactive activities way over rote memorization, and it focuses heavily on real-world application. So we're moving far, far away from that old dry method of just forcing students to blindly memorize grammar charts. Instead, this modern approach empowers students to learn the rules by actually experiencing the language firsthand.
For you as a teacher, this creates a really beautiful, logical progression. By encouraging pure language use through activities, students naturally begin to understand proper syntax. This organic understanding then systematically reduces linguistic errors, which paves the way for highly effective oral and written expression. And the end result of all of this? Total language awareness. You can basically treat this progression as your daily checklist for building confident communicators.
Okay, let's switch gears. I know you've all been waiting for this part. Welcome to Section 5, TET 2 exam preparation.
Consider this 5-mark summary your ultimate cheat sheet for the descriptive section of your exam. If you're asked to summarize the role of grammar, here is your answer. Grammar is the science of pure language use. It builds clear oral expression through proper syntax and confidence while maintaining accurate spelling, punctuation, and style in written expression. Literally just memorize this framework, and you are going to be golden for the written portion.
Now, let's simulate the live exam environment. I'm going to ask you a multiple-choice question, and I want you to lock in your guess. MCQ 1. What is the main purpose of grammar? Think about it. Is it just to memorize rules? Is it only for passing exams?
Take a second. Lock it in. Okay, if you chose B, to ensure pure and proper use of language, you are absolutely correct. The main purpose is not rote memorization, it's actual, pure usage. Excellent job if you hit the nail on the head with that one. Let's keep this momentum going.
Ready for MCQ 2? Which language skills does grammar affect? Think back to that crucial universal glue concept we talked about just a few minutes ago. Does it only affect writing? Or maybe just speaking? Make your choice right now.
So the crucial point is, it's D, all 4 language skills. Remember, listening, speaking, reading, and writing are all fundamentally tied to this structural foundation. If you improve your grammar, you elevate all 4 of these skills at the exact same time, no question about it.
Let's do one final rapid-fire question. MCQ 3. How should grammar be taught in modern language education? Think about that massive pedagogical shift we discussed with the NCF 2005 guidelines. What exactly is the modern approach?
And the correct answer is C, through language use and activities. Honestly, great focus today. You clearly understand that we're leaving the old, boring methods of memorization behind and stepping right into interactive, context-driven teaching. You are definitely for sure ready to tackle this topic on the exam.
I want to conclude this explainer with a really powerful metaphor directly from our sources. Grammar is the skeleton of language. Without it, the clear, pure, and effective expression of ideas is impossible. So as you head into your exams and eventually step into your own classrooms, ask yourself this: will you just be handing your students a pile of disconnected bones? Or will you teach them how to build strong, unbreakable skeletons that give their words true power? Keep studying smart, and we'll catch you next time. All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you're gearing up for your TET 2 exams, or honestly, even if you're just stepping into a real classroom for the first time, you know the feeling. Walking into a room packed with students from entirely different linguistic backgrounds, it can feel pretty daunting. But today, we're going to flip the script. We'll break down the course source material to map out exactly what happens when languages collide, and show you how to turn those major anxieties into your absolute greatest teaching assets. Okay, here's a super quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be looking at the diverse classroom, key language challenges, common errors and barriers, effective teaching solutions, the NCF and NEP perspectives, and wrapping up with your TET 2 exam prep.
Section 1. The diverse classroom.
So, as a future educator, picture this. You walk into your classroom on day 1. When we talk about a diverse classroom, we're not just talking about a couple of different dialects. We're looking at a room where literally every single student brings a completely unique background to their desk. They differ in language, sure, but also in culture, socioeconomic status, educational ability, and their own individual learning pace. It's like a giant puzzle. This beautiful, complex mix makes language teaching incredibly challenging. Because a one-size-fits-all approach, yeah, that just won't work here. You're basically bridging multiple worlds all at once.
Moving right along to Section 2, Key Language Teaching Challenges.
According to the material, there are 7 big hurdles you need to anticipate. First up is multilingualism itself. When the language of instruction clashes with what a student speaks at home, you've got an immediate communication gap. And that naturally leads right into the second challenge, limited vocabulary. Then you start seeing pronunciation issues caused by mother tongue interference, grammar difficulties, and slower reading and writing speeds. But honestly, the most heartbreaking one is number 6, a lack of confidence. Students get so terrified of making a mistake that they just shut down and stay silent. Throw in the 7th challenge, the fact that everyone learns at a totally different pace, and well, you can easily see why this requires a really strategic approach.
Section 3. Common Errors and Barriers. Okay, so let's look at what these struggles actually look like in the real world. Because of mother tongue influence, a student might mispronounce the word for school, saying sala instead of the correct phonetic shala. Or check out spelling errors like writing vidyalai with the incorrect character. These are classic, everyday examples of phonetic and spelling interference that you'll need to catch.
You're also going to spot syntax and grammar mistakes instantly. A really common example from the text is writing a plural sentence like, boys are playing, but adding an incorrect, unnecessary nasal sound at the end. Why does this happen? Well, it stems straight from direct translation habits. The student is basically thinking in their home language and copy-pasting those exact grammatical rules onto the target language.
Now, beyond those specific errors, there are broader barriers you have to tackle. And definitely memorize this categorization because understanding these 5 barriers is an absolute must for your 5-mark subjective answers. We've got linguistic barriers, which is just that sheer language gap, psychological barriers like fear and shyness, sociocultural barriers arising from the huge contrast between a kid's home life and the formal school environment. Then there are educational barriers like overcrowded classes, and finally, technological barriers like simply not having the digital tools to aid modern learning.
Section 4. Effective Teaching Solutions.
All right, let's pivot from the problems to the actual solutions. How do we fix this? By following these 5 steps, you can completely turn the tide. Step 1. Adopt a child-centered approach. Teach to the student not just the rigid syllabus. Step 2. Use a multilingual bridge. Please don't ban their mother tongue. Use it as a helpful crutch to get them to the target language. Step 3, and this is absolutely crucial, create an encouraging environment. You have to treat errors as learning opportunities, not punishable offenses. Step 4, get them talking with storytelling and role play. And finally, Step 5, continuous evaluation. This is exactly how you build a classroom where kids actually want to speak up.
Section 5. The Perspective of NCF and NEP.
This brings us to a massive paradigm shift in modern Indian education, and frankly, it's exactly what the examiners want to see. NCF 2005 explicitly states, we must view linguistic diversity as an asset. Let that sink in. An overlapping, messy, multilingual classroom is not a burden, it is a massive, rich asset.
And the new National Education Policy from 2020 completely backs this up. It heavily emphasizes multilingualism. The whole system is basically telling you, use the mother tongue not as a weakness, but as a vital bridge to learning. This is how we ensure equal educational opportunities for everyone. Embrace the diversity.
Section 6. TET 2 Exam Preparation.
So, how do we turn all this theory into actual marks on your exam? If you get that classic 5-mark subjective question about language challenges, use this exact cheat sheet. First, define the diverse classroom. Second, list out those 7 challenges we talked about. Third, highlight the 5 barriers. And finally, bring it all home by concluding with your child-centered and multilingual solutions. Stick to this structure and you are golden.
Let's do a quick active recall check straight from the material. What is the most common linguistic challenge in a diverse classroom? Sports? Exams? No way. If you've been following along, you know it's A, multilingualism. It's the root challenge that triggers everything else. Next up, how should we actually view linguistic errors? Do we punish them? Ignore them? Actually, the correct answer is B. A modern educator sees a mistake purely as a natural part of the learning process.
And last question, what does NCF 2005 consider linguistic diversity to be? A problem or a limitation? Nope. The answer is C, an asset. It's a resource, never a roadblock.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, powerful thought from our source text. Classroom linguistic diversity is not a problem, but a rich learning opportunity. When you head into your exam, and more importantly, when you step into your future classroom, remember that a student's mistake is literally just the sound of them learning. So the question is, will you choose to see their diverse voices as a daily hurdle, or will you embrace them as your classroom's ultimate superpower? The choice is entirely yours. Good luck with your prep.
Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're exploring the foundations of TET 2 language pedagogy, and our source material uses this brilliant architect of language metaphor to map out a master blueprint. By understanding exactly how the foundations of communication are built, you're not just going to pass your exams, you're literally learning how to transform the minds of your future students.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with an intro to language skills, move into the 4 basic skills, cover the supportive skills, discuss the teacher's role, and wrap it all up with some targeted TET 2 exam prep.
Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 1, an intro to language skills. So what actually are language skills? Well, at ground zero of pedagogy, we define them as the essential abilities required to understand, use, and express language effectively. The whole core purpose of language education is to develop this exact capacity. I mean, you simply cannot build a student's fluency without these fundamental tools.
And this builds into a fascinating chronological sequence: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This LSRW progression is a golden thread for your exam prep because it perfectly mirrors the natural order of human language acquisition right from birth.
Moving on to Section 2, let's look at the 4 basic skills, which are basically our core language pillars.
Our very first pillar is the listening skill. Now, what's really fascinating here is that listening isn't merely passive hearing. It is the very first active step in language learning. It aids in proper pronunciation and builds basic comprehension. Think of activities like a child hearing stories, listening to a song, or just following simple instructions. Listening is really a child's very first micro-scenario step into the wider interactive world of human communication.
Pillar number 2 is the speaking skill. This is the oral expression of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Speaking is where foundational confidence is built, you know. It turns that passive understanding into active, real-world engagement. Through activities like classroom discussions, giving speeches, asking questions, and role play, the student is learning the practical, everyday use of the language.
Following speaking comes the reading skill, which is the ability to read written text and truly understand its meaning. This brilliantly illustrates how reading unlocks a much broader universe of knowledge. It enriches a student's vocabulary and deeply expands their mind's imaginative capacity. We see this develop through guided lesson reading, silent reading, and comprehension-based questioning.
And our 4th and final basic pillar is the writing skill, expressing thoughts in a written format. This is the final, most complex structural capstone of our basic pillars. It demands both precision and creativity from the student. Writing elevates the purity of the language and strengthens expression through things like essays, letter writing, reports, and story writing.
All right, Section 3, supportive language skills. Think of these as the essential mortar holding everything together.
There are 2 key types of mortar holding our pillars together: comprehension and expression. They really act as 2 sides of the exact same coin. Comprehension, whether that's through listening or reading, develops a true analytical understanding of information. Expression, on the other hand, allows a student to effectively present their internal thoughts, boosting confidence and communication skills. Together, they turn raw, basic skills into meaningful human connection.
And we definitely can't forget vocabulary, the collection of known and utilized words. If comprehension and expression are the mortar, vocabulary acts as the physical bricks. The richer the vocabulary, the taller the final structure can be. It's absolutely crucial for all 4 skills and can be enhanced by regular reading, dictionary use, and daily conversations.
Let's transition to Section 4, the teacher's role and guidelines for educators.
So the crucial point is that a teacher's role isn't just to stand there and lecture. A master builder provides students with ample opportunities to actually use the language. It involves conducting engaging reading and writing activities, correcting linguistic errors in a highly supportive and constructive way, and most importantly, carefully engineering a rich linguistic environment where language thrives naturally.
Now, your blueprints are also guided by national standards, and you'll want to notice the distinction between NCF 2005 and NEP 2020. NCF 2005 emphasizes learning through use, focusing on integrated development and meaningful dialogic activities. Meanwhile, the NEP 2020 mandate shifts toward a skill-based approach, highlighting multilingualism and places a really special emphasis on reading and expression. Keeping this distinction crystal clear is highly useful for the exam.
Which brings us to Section 5, TET 2 exam preparation. Time for the final inspection.
If you get hit with a descriptive 10-mark question on the exam, here is how you construct the perfect answer blueprint. Start by defining the LSRW pillars clearly: listening for understanding, speaking for oral expression, reading for knowledge, and writing for written form. Then explicitly tie in that supportive mortar we talked about: comprehension, expression, and vocabulary. That gives you a fully balanced pedagogical view.
Okay, let's do a rapid-fire knowledge check. What is the natural order of language development? Is it reading first, speaking first? Think back to that golden thread.
The answer is listening, speaking, reading, writing. Good old LSRW. If you just picture a baby listening, then speaking, then reading, and finally writing, it will lock this into your memory for test day.
Next question. Let's keep the rhythm going here. What is the exact meaning of vocabulary? Think about the physical materials we need for our building.
It's word collection, the collection of words a person knows and uses. Remember, these are the essential individual bricks of our language building.
All right, one final rapid-fire test on the core pillars of our pedagogical framework. What are the 4 basic language skills?
Exactly right. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Seeing this repeated reinforces just how absolutely central these 4 pillars are to the TET 2 exam. You've definitely got this blueprint down.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this powerful summarizing quote. The 4 basic skills, listening, speaking, reading, writing, are the foundational pillars of language education. Always remember LSRW. With this master blueprint in your mind, the question isn't really whether you'll pass the TET 2 exam, but rather, how magnificent will the structure of language be that you build in the minds of your future students? Keep building, keep learning, and good luck.
Welcome, future educators, to this explainer. Today, we're totally transforming your pedagogical approach. We're going to make sure you not only build incredible classrooms, but, absolutely ace those TET 2 exams. We're diving deep into the methodology of language skills assessment, and we're uncovering exactly how to measure student progress in a way that actually matters.
Okay, consider this quote for a second. Teaching language is not enough. Evaluating learning is necessary. I really want you to let that sink in. Because simply talking at your students, well, that isn't teaching. True education means knowing exactly what they're absorbing. If we aren't measuring their progress, we're not really teaching, we're just talking. Assessment is basically the bridge between your teaching and their actual learning.
So here's our masterclass syllabus for today. First, why assessment? 2, the 4 main language skills. 3, various dimensions of assessment. 4, assessment types and policies. And finally, number 5, TET 2 exam preparation.
Kicking things off with Section 1, Why Assessment? Understanding the purpose.
So why do we even bother testing students in the first place? Well, look, assessment isn't a punishment. It's a highly effective diagnostic tool for you, the teacher. The objectives are pretty clear-cut. We need to track linguistic progress and spot specific difficulties early on. But maybe more importantly, it checks our own teaching effectiveness. I mean, if an entire class is just looking at you with blank stares, that feedback is for us. Ultimately, assessment guides improvement and makes sure we're developing all 4 of those foundational language skills.
Moving on to Section 2, the 4 main language skills. Think of this as the educator's toolkit.
Now, these 4 skills are literally the foundational pillars of language learning. First up is listening. But how exactly do we measure something completely invisible? Well, we break it down into observable metrics, things like attention, comprehension, and how well they follow instructions. To actually test this in the classroom, we use active methods, asking questions right after a story, playing audio clips, or even doing fill-in-the-blank exercises.
Next up is speaking, which definitely requires a unique blend of confidence and clarity. Here, you're checking pronunciation, language purity, and their active vocabulary use. We test this through oral Q&As, discussions, and storytelling. And honestly, role-playing is absolutely brilliant here. It throws students into these real-world scenarios where they literally have to think and speak on their feet, which, let's face it, is essentially what language is all about.
That directly builds right into reading assessment. Here, we're checking their reading speed, mechanical accuracy, and deep comprehension. So, having a student read out loud? That's great for testing pronunciation. But having them read silently and then summarize the passage, that tests their deep cognitive comprehension. You really need both for a complete, holistic evaluation. And wrapping up our core 4, we've got writing assessment. Writing is kind of the ultimate synthesis, right? It combines grammar, spelling, organizational logic, and that spark of individual creativity. We check all of these competencies through essays, letters, reports, and story writing. It's the moment where the student brings everything they've absorbed together and puts it right onto the physical page.
All right, Section 3, Various Dimensions of Assessment. Taking it beyond the basics.
So beyond the core 4, there are these secondary layers of language assessment that add real nuance to a student's profile. Think about it. A student might conceptually know a vocabulary word perfectly, but completely lack the ability to express it fluently in an actual conversation. That is exactly why we assess comprehension, vocabulary, and expression as separate dimensions. It's really all about how gracefully they can wield the linguistic tools they've been given.
Which brings us to Section 4, Assessment Types and Policies. Let's look at the national framework.
Let's zoom out a bit from the local classroom to the national level to see how government policies actually back up these methods. There are 2 major frameworks you need to know. First is formative assessment. This is your ongoing, continuous feedback happening right in the middle of your teaching, stuff like class discussions or projects. Then you have summative assessment. This is the final judgment at the end of the curriculum, like your annual exams. Formative builds the student up along the way, while summative measures where they ultimately landed.
And you know, this isn't just best practice, it's literally national policy. If you look at the NCF 2005 and the much newer NEP 2020, both of these massive educational frameworks completely reject traditional rote memorization. They demand continuous assessment of all 4 skills, not just writing answers on a test, and they heavily favor true competency and real-world application. As modern educators, your classroom assessments absolutely must reflect this shift.
All right, let's hit Section 5, TET 2 Exam Preparation. Time to secure your marks.
Okay, let's shift gears into high-energy test prep mode. If you encounter a descriptive 10-mark question asking you to explain language skills assessment, here is your precise, no-fail blueprint for full points. First, detail the 4 core skills. Second, list the specific assessment methods for each of those skills. And finally, bring it home by concluding with the absolute need for continuous, holistic evaluation based on those national policies we just talked about. You follow that structure and you've secured your 10 marks for sure.
Now, let's do a little rapid-fire quiz sequence, just to wake up your active recall. We'll start with the most foundational question of the entire topic. What are the 4 main language skills? Think about the natural sequence of how a human learns a language. Did you get it? The correct answer is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This specific sequence is definitely not random. It is the absolute golden rule of language pedagogy. We hear, we speak, we read, and then we write. All right, let's keep the pace quick. Next question. Which skill is assessed by speech and discussion? Think back to those practical classroom methods we highlighted earlier.
The correct answer is speaking. Remember, oral Q&As, debates, discussions, and role plays, those are your primary active assessment methods to really test a student's spoken purity and their confidence.
Okay, here is the final MCQ. I'm going to challenge you to remember that crucial distinction between the 2 major policy-backed types of assessment. Ready? What is continuous assessment during teaching called?
It's formative assessment. Huge congratulations if you nailed that one. Summative happens at the very end, but formative is that ongoing, incredibly helpful feedback loop right during the learning process. By mastering these distinctions, you are literally mastering the very core of TET 2 methodology.
So, if you take nothing else away, remember this acronym, LSRW. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. You need to permanently anchor this into your memory for exam day. True language evaluation absolutely must cover all 4 of these areas. Actually, let me put it this way. If your exam answer ignores even one of these pillars, it's incomplete.
We're going to end today with this memorable and I think pretty provocative thought. Assessment is about holistic development, not just marks. Passing the TET 2 is honestly just your first step. The real question is, are your future classrooms ready for LSRW? Take this knowledge, apply it way beyond the exam, and go transform your future students. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep up the great studying, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome to this focused explainer designed specifically for all you aspiring language teachers out there preparing for the TET 2 exam. Today, we're going to decode the exact teaching materials you really need to master. We'll be diving deep into the strategies that make language teaching effective, interesting, and totally student-centered. Because let's be honest, that is exactly what the examiners are looking for.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We've got 1. The core of TLM. 2. Textbooks, the foundation. 3. Multimedia, engaging the senses. 4. Multilingual resources, bridging languages. 5. Policy guidelines and teachers. And we'll wrap up with 6. TET 2 exam readiness.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the core of TLM. What actually makes learning click?
So, teaching learning materials, or TLM, are essentially all the tools, materials, and resources that a teacher uses to make the whole teaching and learning process simple, interesting, and highly effective. And listen, this exact definition, this is what you absolutely need to memorize and write down for your exam foundation, because it's not just about, delivering a bunch of dry facts. It's about actually developing language skills, comprehension, expression, and creativity in your future students.
Okay? I want you to lock this core equation into your memory right now. The ultimate mnemonic for your exam is TLM equals T plus M plus M. That stands for textbook, multimedia, and multilingual resources. Understanding these three pillars is literally the secret to scoring high. Why? Because pretty much every single question about classroom strategy ultimately comes right back to this very formula.
Moving right along to Section 2, Textbooks, the foundation. The primary tool for your curriculum.
You see, a textbook isn't just some boring book of facts, right? It's your structured guide. An ideal textbook aligns perfectly with the curriculum, using simple, clear, age-appropriate language. But to truly promote self-study, it has to be interesting. It needs to be heavily illustrated and deeply activity-based, so it actually connects to a student's real life outside the classroom. When you combine all of these traits, they work together to develop those core listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills.
Next up is Section 3, Multimedia, Engaging the Senses, Bringing Education to Life.
Look at how seamlessly everyday tools like projectors and smartboards map directly onto the 4 core language skills you'll be teaching. For listening, throwing in audio clips of poems and stories dramatically improves comprehension. For speaking, videos and smartboards are amazing for refining pronunciation and dialogue skills. Then, when it comes to reading, ebooks provide these vast, highly accessible opportunities. And for writing, computers and educational apps allow for crucial digital writing practice. Basically, multimedia increases focus, makes the tough concepts way easier to grasp, and encourages kids to learn on their own.
All right, on to Section 4, Multilingual Resources, Bridging Languages, Inclusive and Fearless Learning.
Think about tools like bilingual dictionaries, translated materials, or language charts for a second. Why do they matter so much? Well, they use the student's mother tongue as a secure, familiar base to help them learn entirely new languages. By bridging that local, everyday language with the formal school language, you instantly remove the fear of making a mistake. You replace that fear with undeniable confidence, allowing them to express themselves fearlessly. Plus, it naturally builds a deep respect for linguistic and cultural diversity right there in your classroom, which makes learning unfamiliar concepts feel, well, pretty effortless.
Let's shift gears to Section 5, Policy Guidelines and Teachers, Navigating NCF 2005 and NEP 2020.
I know, policy documents can be a little dry, but understanding how these two differ is absolutely vital for your exam. Notice how the National Curriculum Framework from 2005 frames multilingualism purely as an asset and pushes really heavily for activity-based learning. Meanwhile, the newer National Education Policy 2020 accelerates things. It strongly promotes digital technology-based education while simultaneously placing a massive emphasis on using the mother tongue and local language.
So, where do you fit into all this? As a teacher, your role is clearly defined here. You've got to carefully select the most appropriate teaching learning materials. You need to expand your resources way beyond just the basic textbook. You have to integrate multimedia and ICT effectively. You absolutely must adopt a welcoming multilingual approach. And finally, transform your students from passive listeners into active learning partners. As a future educator, following these exact steps ensures you aren't just lecturing at kids, but actively facilitating true understanding.
And finally, Section 6, TET2 Exam Readiness. Let's test that active recall.
Okay, moment of truth. Are you ready to test your knowledge with some actual TET2 exam MCQs? I challenge you to guess the answer in your head right before I reveal it. Let's do this.
Here is part 1. First question. What is the main teaching learning tool for language? If you correctly remembered that the answer is the textbook, you are already well on your way to a perfect score. Next question. What exactly does multimedia include? The correct answer is text, audio, images, and video, all combined. It's not just one or the other. It's the seamless integration of them all.
Moving on to part 2. Question. What is the main benefit of multilingual resources? The answer is that it helps students actually understand the language while building a genuine respect for diversity. Final question. What approach does NEP 2020 promote? The answer? Multilingual and digital education. See how seamlessly that NEP 2020 question connects right back to our core digital and multilingual pillars? It is all connected, folks.
Now, what about that massive descriptive section of your test? When you face that big 10-mark descriptive question asking you to explain the importance of these materials, I want you to write out this exact formula to structure your essay perfectly. Start with the textbook as your foundation of knowledge. Then, dedicate your next paragraph to multimedia for making the learning interesting and engaging.
Finally, explain multilingual resources as the ultimate key to simple understanding and diversity. Together, those three equal effective teaching.
And to wrap up that essay, you're going to want a mic drop conclusion. This golden summary, translated right from your source material, is the absolute perfect way to conclude your exam essay. The textbook is the foundation of knowledge, multimedia brings education to life, and multilingual resources make language teaching more equitable and effective. Seriously, memorize that line word for word.
Think about how powerful this knowledge makes you as a future teacher. You aren't just memorizing facts to pass a test here. You are literally learning how to build an incredible, dynamic classroom environment. I challenge you to apply this exact structured approach to the rest of your TET 2 studies. Stay focused, rely on those 3 core pillars, and hey, best of luck on your exam. You've got this.
All right, welcome TET 2 aspirants. We are kicking off a brand new study session today, and we're tackling a massive scoring area for your upcoming exam, the principles and methods of remedial language teaching. Get ready because we're going to break this down so logically that you'll literally be answering these exam questions in your sleep. Let's get right to it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture yourself in your future classroom. You are delivering this brilliantly planned lesson, but you quickly realize something. Why don't all students learn at the same pace? You know, studies actually show that in a typical classroom, students' learning levels can span up to 5 different grades. It's a universal classroom reality that every single teacher has to face. Some kids grasp the concept instantly, while others just seem to hit a wall. As an educator, this is where your true expertise gets tested. You aren't just reading from a textbook. You've got to figure out how to help every single student succeed, totally regardless of their starting line.
So here's our quick roadmap for this explainer. We'll look at what remedial teaching is, why it's necessary, the 4-step process, your role as a teacher, national policies, and then we'll wrap up with some rapid-fire TET 2 MCQs.
Section 1. What exactly is remedial teaching?
To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to shift your mindset a bit. Think of yourself not just as an educator, but, well, as an educational doctor. Just like a doctor treats a physical illness, a teacher treats a learning gap. Remedial teaching is formally defined as the special teaching given to diagnose and remove a student's educational flaws and learning difficulties. Notice those 2 key words, diagnose and remove. It's not just repeating the same lesson louder or slower and hoping it eventually clicks. No, it's a highly targeted, specialized intervention designed specifically to fix a defined problem.
Moving to Section 2, why is this teaching necessary?
Well, when you look out across your classroom, you're going to see a whole range of what we might call symptoms. You might have a student struggling with reading fluency, another making consistent writing and spelling errors, or someone having major pronunciation problems. You might notice a severe lack of vocabulary, repeated grammar mistakes, or just a complete breakdown in reading comprehension. And honestly, perhaps the most heartbreaking symptom of all, a total lack of confidence. Our objective with remedial teaching is to step in, fix these specific language skills, and by doing that, completely rebuild that student's self-esteem.
Section 3. The 4 main stages of the process.
Now, what's really interesting about this framework is that it shows up on the TET 2 exam year after year. So grab your mental highlighters. We use a memory trick to lock this in. D-R-E-R. D-R-E-R. First is diagnosis. You have to actually find the specific difficulty using tests or even just careful observation. Next is reason. You must dig deeper to identify the root cause. Like, is it a linguistic issue, a lack of prior knowledge, or maybe even a disruptive home environment? Third is the actual remedial teaching, where you plan and provide that special, customized guidance. And finally, reevaluation. You've got to check if your treatment actually worked. Has the student improved? Remember D-R-E-R. Diagnosis, reason, remedial teaching, reevaluation. Anchor that in your mind right now.
Section 4. The teacher's role in language education.
Every specific learning illness needs a highly specific medicine. So if your student is struggling with listening, your direct remedy is using audio materials and engaging stories. If the issue is speaking, well, you prescribe interactive discussions and role play. For reading difficulties, you step in with guided loud and silent reading practice. And for writing issues, you break things down into focused word and paragraph writing exercises. You don't just guess, you target the specific language skill with its exact corresponding activity.
But listen, your job is way more than just handing out worksheets, right? As a teacher, your underlying responsibilities are what actually make the difference. You must proactively identify these difficulties before the kid falls too far behind. Absolutely crucial here, you must maintain a highly empathetic, encouraging attitude. You provide the suitable activities we just mapped out, and you give continuous constructive feedback. You really have to create a space where errors are seen as a totally natural part of the learning journey, not something to be punished for.
Section 5. NCF and NEP policies. And this brilliantly illustrates the national level backing for these methods, which is super important for your syllabus. Notice how our highest national frameworks demand we view the student. NCF 2005 explicitly states that errors are a natural part of learning. It requires a supportive environment based entirely on individual needs. Fast forward to NEP 2020, and it pushes strongly for equal learning opportunities, specifically mandating that we actively remove learning gaps and place a massive focus on foundational literacy and numeracy. Both of these policies scream one unified message: you cannot just blindly rush to finish a syllabus. You've got to stop, diagnose, and treat the individual gaps.
Section 6. Important points for the TET2 exam. Let's test that knowledge.
All right, time to shift into rapid-fire exam prep mode. Mentally lock in your answer before I reveal it. Question 1. What is the accurate Gujarati term for remedial teaching? Is it A, creative teaching, B, upcharatmak teaching, C, experimental, or D, collaborative? Take a second.
If you guessed B, upcharatmak shikshan, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. It literally ties directly back to that medical idea of providing a treatment or remedy.
Let's hit question 2. Let's see if you remember our acronym. What is the very first stage of remedial teaching? Is it A, evaluation, B, teaching, C, diagnosis, or D, revision?
The answer is C, diagnosis. Remember, you literally cannot prescribe a remedy until you have accurately diagnosed the illness. That is the D in our DRER mnemonic.
Awesome. Moving right along to question 3. What is the main, overarching objective of remedial teaching? A, just to prepare for exams. B, to remove educational difficulties. C, just to award marks. Or D, to complete the syllabus on time.
It's B. Our ultimate goal as true educators is fixing the underlying problems and removing educational difficulties, not just racing to the end of a textbook or chasing after test scores.
Okay, final question. Let's bring it home. In language education specifically, remedial teaching is related to which skills? Is it A, writing, B, reading, C, speaking, or D, listening, speaking, reading, and writing?
And the answer is D, the whole shebang, all 4 of them. If you get a 10-mark descriptive question on this exact topic, remember to summarize that diagnosing flaws and preparing programs to remove difficulties across all 4 of these foundational skills is what truly accelerates a student's progress.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this defining thought to carry into your exams and honestly into your future careers. Treatment is not possible without diagnosis, therefore, the basis of remedial teaching is diagnostic evaluation. You are going to be the doctors of the classroom. Use these tools, diagnose carefully, and go out there and make a massive difference for your students. Keep studying hard, and best of luck on your TET2 exam. But before you go, ask yourself this: what will be the very first symptom you look for when you walk into your classroom tomorrow?